So do we have the other participants also online? Yes, they could. Yes, and here they are. So, well, first of all, welcome to you.
If I'm here, they cannot see them.
You can? Okay, so let me introduce you to our guests. We have John Mouat is the chair of one of the EIHA committee at OSPAR. So where we grounding the initial stages of OceanWise. Elisa Sétien has been with us from the beginning. Elisa, when we started the project, we met first in 2019. Elisa was at the time the Director General of Eumeps, which is the European Association for the Producers and Manufacturers of EPS, based in Brussels. She's no longer in the same position, but has been with us all along and helping us shape the project. And Inês Costa from Portugal is currently at Deloitte as a consultant, but when we started the project was designing and launching the Portuguese action plan for circular economy, and was then Secretary of State for the Environment in the Environment Ministry. And so for the three of you, welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm going to start with you, Elisa. You've seen the evolution of the project from the beginning, and I remember when we first talked back in 2019, and we met in one of the stakeholders meetings in London, and I had to convince
Dublin.
In Dublin, okay, sorry. And I had to convince you that we were a reasonable and moderate forum worth listening to, because of course all the industry believed that we were here to ban EPS, and I told you, no, we're here to prevent that EPS reaches the sea. Maybe in 3 years' time we'll be telling you that we want EPS out of the market completely, and we'll be strong advocates. But you've seen how the project has evolved. How do you think now that we're coming to the end, is it useful?
Well, it has evolved a lot, and I would say in a positive direction. It's true that at the beginning of today, you have said there were some stakeholders saying, "Why are you focusing on EPS?" So I was one of those stakeholders. I still think that EPS has been targeted, maybe not for the good reasons. But I still think that we have a common goal, and that's something that was clear then in 2018, 2019, and it's still clear today. None of us wants to see EPS in marine litter. That's as clear as it gets. And we have, in the industry, we believe that we have potential for additional recycling. I still believe that EPS is a material that is highly recyclable, and it's widely recycled. Could we do better? Sure. But it's in our best interest that EPS does not come into marine litter. Having said that, I still think that I do not agree with the recommendations you have done with the SUP today. But mostly I think the project has advanced in a lot of directions. I think it's extremely positive that the statistics of the OSPAR are separating EPS, or at least making its best to try to separate EPS and XPS more and more from different plastics, or from this mixed collection of plastics that it was at the beginning. I think it's also positive that you are openly discussing about the environmental impact of EPS, that as we have seen today, well, we don't seem to generate toxicity or significant toxicity in the seawater. That's I think it's a nice discovery or a nice finding of this project. Industry is always looking for alternatives. So I think that the fact that the project has also dig into that is positive. I personally, have a small, so close to my heart is the hackathons and all the activities that have been done to try to promote EPS and to try to have these oceans calling with new products, alternatives, new ideas, as the EPS slicer that the Aveiro colleagues have presented today. I think those are aspects of this project that I did not see then in 2018, 2019, but I'm glad that they have been developed through the project.
Okay, thank you. But do you think the project will be useful for the industry to take up the recommendations?
I am sure some of the recommendations could be taken up, but I'm afraid we are going to challenge some of the others, even if I'm not in the EPS industry anymore.
Okay.
I can predict that very clearly.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Then, John, you have been there from the beginning when we first started the project. Now, of course, OSPAR has evolved to a new regional action plan, which includes, of course, the OceanWise results in there. How do you think the project results will be useful?
Yeah, thank you very much. And firstly, sorry for not being with you there in person today. I would like to have been there, but I think that I'm really impressed with the outcomes of the project, and I think, as Michail said at the start, having that clear link in through to how the project results can impact on policy will be useful. Obviously, as you mentioned at the start, this was kicked off by the first regional action plan that OSPAR took on marine litter, and this summer we adopted a second regional action plan where we have now have quantitative targets to achieve for reduction of single-use plastics, working alongside the Single-Use Plastics Directive. But there's also specific actions in there looking at how we can pick up the results from this project and particularly apply them across OSPAR. And I think, therefore, the products where we're looking at information for policymakers will be very helpful in how we can take that forward. And hopefully we can see where OSPAR can add value. Obviously, there's spreading it through the European directive is a way to reach a wider reach in terms of some of the actions, but OSPAR obviously brings in countries that are not members of the EU anymore, possibly. And we need to see where those added values can be, and particularly looking at some of the marine products where OSPAR can perhaps take quicker action than 2027. So we're looking forward to seeing the results feeding into the development of that particular action under our regional action plan on EPS and XPS.
Yeah, thank you. Michail, I would ask you the same, of course. How do you think the OceanWise project will be useful from the viewpoint of the Commission?
Thank you. Well, I have to say that I learned a lot today. Of course, I knew what the project's about and had read some reports, but really I understood today much better what you did and why. And if I may, I think it's understandable that I come from the marine environment point of view, so I was more interested, so to speak. Of course, everything was interesting, but I was more interested on the analysis of the impacts on the marine environment, of the material, and also of the alternative materials. And I think it's because you know that identifying the impact of a material on the marine environment or of a pressure, so to speak, is a very complicated issue to identify impact on species and habitats. But now what you did, if I understood it correctly at least, is that instead of trying to find the perfect methodology, you focused on a material, you identified some impact criteria, so to speak, and then you applied the same criteria to the substance and to alternatives, which is, let's say, brings us away from, let's say, seeking the absolute best methodology of what is the impact and how. No, we compare the impacts of various materials, and for this specific material, this is, I found quite interesting and original in your project, focusing on a material from all points of view. So for this specific material, which is problematic for the marine environment, we know, but to which extent, why, and how can we reduce the problematic aspects. So these were adequately covered. And now we know, for example, I mean, improvisingly, we know that there's no need, so to speak, from the marine environment point of view to ban EPS, but we must ban the buoys or the other application I forgot. Huh? So these two, for example, for these two cases, it should no longer be used, full stop. And we also know that PLA, for example, is not necessarily much better. So from the marine environment point of view. So these are the aspects that I found interesting.
Michail, we also, when we started the project focusing on EPS and XPS, we've always said that the project is intended also to provide a benchmark for future work done on the same approach, trying to bring the concern for marine environment, the risk and potential risks of plastics to other, about other materials, of course. We don't have any obsession with EPS or XPS. We took this problem on board, but we've always looked at it as a potential benchmark that could be used for other projects. And so, of course, this is something that we, OceanWise closes with the recommendations that we have for these materials, but we see it as a proposal also that can be taken up in future work. And Inês Costa, you are on that balance between the marine environment, of course, but then of course the circular economy and from other perspective is your field. How do you see this and the usefulness of this project?
No, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here to comment. I've been following the OceanWise project for quite some time in my past life as an aide for circular economy with the minister and also as a Secretary of State for Environment. I think that OceanWise was a very successful project in the way that it bridged a gap that still exists today between what are our wants and what we actually do. So without any, second thinking, without any, hidden agendas, OceanWise basically very plainly said, look, we want to find what is the impact of these materials on the marine environment, what can be viable substitutions. Let us think this in a systems approach way. So there is the value in the approach that OceanWise provided as a tool by itself with all the hackathons, etc., is also valuable as a deliverable to be replicated in other types of materials. So that's one approach. I think that it also it serves us as a reminder that we are still very far away of being actually committed with the flagship ambition delivered by the European Commission and even at the international level. Let me remind you that tomorrow the European Commission is due to propose a new law to tackle packaging waste. There was a lot of information going on in the past few weeks about it, with mixed feelings about it. The industry was very remanent in pushing back the ambition thrown out by the European Commission. I understand that today there were all sorts of news about diluting the ambition on the aspect of, for example, for reuse, which is absolutely fundamental to really achieve the circularity in plastics that we want. And at the same time, we are having a meeting, UN global meeting in Uruguay right now to discuss a global plastics treaty. So these are pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, within which OceanWise is part of, more than you can at first think of, that really connect the dots between, yes, there are ambitious goals, We know that they are probably not feasible in a calendar that is settled, but we really want to, okay, what can we do right now to be put on that path towards achieving those objectives? We cannot, in this particular case of plastic pollution, demands are going to be higher from the European Commission, and not only through directives such as Packaging Waste Directive. Other directives are already pushing for evidences of what companies and businesses, like in the fishing industry and others, of what they are doing in terms of reducing their exposure to plastic pollution. For instance, in the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive that was also approved this week, or the regulation on eco-design, these are issues that are going to be central to business competitiveness in the short term to medium term. So projects like OceanWise provide evidence that yes, it is possible to do it. It is possible to creatively, and in together we can creatively develop solutions, and not only to these particular types of plastic CPS, but also we can perhaps do it to other types of materials as well.
Yes, thank you. And Anna, you are now working directly with the industry and advising the industry. How do you see the usefulness of a project like OceanWise?
Well, I think the industry, it's not used to have this kind of participation or collaborative process, and to use that kind of process to make changes in their industry. All the stakeholders platform, the Dialogue Living Labs made, they are quite innovative for the industry. They are not used to think and look to the other players as a partner, but more like a competitor. If the OceanWise is capable to show that everybody together, without having problems with showing their failures or their disadvantages on the market, if everybody puts the cards on the table, probably they're going to work on measures and explain to the policymakers the help that they need to make the changes. But this kind of process, it takes a long time, but it's more useful than just make the policymaker make a law, and like was the case of the plastic bags in Portugal. It was not completely with the industry, and some industries, they have to close down because the policy enters before the industry was capable to make the change. And I think that the OceanWise can make the opposite. With this, during 3-4 years, they were talking with the industry, talking with the recyclers, and explained the importance to deal with the problem. Now the industry understands that they have to make something to change, because more one day, less day, they're going to have that kind of rules of that legal documents are going to make them make that new innovation or that measure, and they're going to have the risk of closing down if they don't do something. And I think that this kind of project, if the industry understands their role, they can play and they can get advantage to make the changes that they need to face this problem.
Okay, how do you see, okay, next steps, what in the short term, what is your recommendation for how to take it up, how to go about it?
To involve the industry?
Yes.
You have to put the industry and the policymakers together. These two elements, they have to be together, because when they understand, the market works perfectly, that's no problem, but the market, it's not obvious who is the client sometimes. When I produce EPS, I don't know who is going to be the user at the end, right? More or less. But if I make a construction material, I know who is my client. But if I only work with my clients, it's not going to be enough, because my clients do not understand the problem. And so if I have the industry, the policymaker, maybe some NGO, but sometimes they are not very well known by the industry, but the customer, the user. You put these three together and working together to make the policy, the public policy, you can make the change. So I think that this is the next step. I don't know if it's through Environmental Portuguese Agency and the other agencies in Europe, but this has to be a collaborative process. If it's only the policymaker to make the rule, the industry is not going to make the change just like this. But I think that we have to put all the three on the table and say, we intend to put this kind of rules, do you agree what you are intending to do, and reach a compromise solution. And this has to be done really, really fast.
Okay, Elisa, would you agree with this pathway?
I like this idea of not having a top-down approach and to have a more collaborative and open process. I also believe that this project has shown, I think quite clearly, that also the Commission and the authorities, they work in silos, and that nevertheless things go together. So this is not a DG Environment or DG Energy or DG, Industry problem. That goes together. And that's not always the case. For example, in the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive that's going to be published tomorrow, it's for sure that they haven't considered the marine litter aspect of the products. So, and that's a reality also of how the law is being done. So definitely working together and talking together would be a good step forward.
Michail, do you think projects like OceanWise can be, what do we need more to do to help you to get all the silos, as Elisa is calling them, together? Of course, we have talked also with other teams in the Commission, and you have been our main connection, of course, being the representative that is at OSPAR. Of course, we have you bringing the plastics strategy and the Green Deal and the action plan to us, of course. But what are the next steps? How can we help more, other than delivering you the project?
Well, I think there are two aspects. One in terms of knowledge acquisition and knowledge which has been created and put together by this project. This is one thing. And the second thing is the interaction with stakeholders. And both are very important for developing and for updating legislation. There was, I don't remember anymore who mentioned the revision of the review of the Single-Use Plastics Directive, which will take place soon. We had recently the review of the Packaging Directive, which is a very old one. If I remember well, it's from '94. And it's not the first revision of the Packaging Directive. So the legislation is constantly updated, and two things, at least two, are very essential. First, take into account the latest knowledge, and second, take into account the views of all the stakeholders, of industry, of course, but not only of industry, because each stakeholder has their own, how shall I say, perspective, and it is necessary to consider, an organization like the Commission or national administration which makes laws has to consider the social interest and the societal, all the societal aspects, not just one stakeholder. The economic, the environmental, the social aspects, and so on and so forth.
Inês, you are in the habit of bringing things forward, pushing them forward, and as you say, we have short-term mission to place in many forums. What are your recommendations for how do we go about it?
Let me react on what the previous speakers mentioned, Anna in particular. We have an issue here in Portugal, unfortunately. I'm not aware of how it is in other EU member countries, but we tend to descale the importance of the pipeline of regulations that come out of the European Commission. And we are sort of come late to the game in terms of their discussion and implementation. So all the work starts with a proposal, okay? And that proposal is discussed several times across the span of perhaps one to 2 years, where there are several forums open to stakeholders to discuss the proposals of the Commission or the proposals for reassessment of directives. And public participation of civil society and of business must be further amplified at that stage. In Portugal, I feel, at least in my role as Secretary of State, I could say that for me it was very, it left me a lot of anxiety to see certain directives coming into play in Portuguese context. So they're still usually, typically, on average, a 2-year span to transpose the directives into national law. And just and we engaged with companies. We tried to, through the environmental agency, we engage with stakeholders. We make meetings to reflect and to provide evidence on the objectives of the directive. But still, just as the directive is about to be transposed into national law and national law coming into effect, it's when suddenly companies wake up and say, oh, we are not ready. Although this piece of legislation has been in discussion for over 4 years. So at least 4 years. So for me, my experience in public office has been quite, I'm sorry to say, sort of contrasting between wanting to present and to discuss a piece of regulation that was, ambitious, purpose-driven, and not having enough feedback from on-the-ground companies in Portugal about their willingness to step up their game and develop solutions to meet those objectives. So in the case of plastics, we have wonderful interactions with the Plastic Pack Coalition, for example, who has been, apart from OceanWise project, of course, it's another example of how business, citizens, ONGs came together to discuss the implications of the Single-Use Plastic Directive, of all the changes into the Plastic Packaging Directive, and to try to effectively work on a platform that delivers very concrete objectives. In the end, every time we talk about, and let me just clarify the elephant in the room, every time we talk about reducing the economy's exposure to plastic, to unnecessary plastic, disposable plastic, which is not, used for high-value purposes, such as, for instance, medical supplies, etc., there is always a backlash because we are talking about reducing consumption of a material. So there is always going to be backlash from the industry because they are always going to be threatened by it, threatened by objectives of reduce and reuse. So even recycling, you can see that recycling is sort of going into the direction of being sort of in a lock-in position in relation to recycling, to the point where industry says, well, look, recycling collecting schemes are not viable unless we have plastic in the system. So that's a sort of a context in which we have to work, which we certainly have to work at systems level. So business, organization, governments, and citizens as well. Otherwise, it will not be possible to achieve those goals.
John, on top of that, we have the issue of getting enterprises to be concerned about marine environment, about marine litter. We're hearing in their talk a lot of talking about marine litter. We used to be alone. Some 6, 7, 8 years ago, we felt like we were the only ones concerned with marine litter, but this is something that is reaching out to several fields and of course also to companies. But do you feel do you feel we're really reaching them? Of course, the new marine litter action plan is also aiming at that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a sea change in the approach to marine litter and understanding within various industries, particularly when we're talking about the fishing industry, agriculture, have really changed their view in terms of approaching litter and waste that enters into the marine environment. I think it's important that we continue with the monitoring work that OSPAR does, and it gives a very good base to look across the entire Northeast Atlantic region and really highlight the different types of materials and what we see in the environment. And it was obviously that data supported the development of the Single-Use Plastics Directive by really highlighting the types of items that we find in the environment and needed to be addressed. So I think the awareness is much higher there, and I can definitely see I think a role here for OSPAR in terms of taking the OceanWise results and really focusing in on combining some of the actions that we have in the plan, looking at waste from agriculture and fisheries, and taking some of the ideas around taking a circular approach and looking at the complete supply chain and how we can deal with these products, bringing the suppliers and the end users together, and whether there's a role for OSPAR to developing measures, particularly in that way, to kind of standardise the approach across the different OSPAR countries in terms of how we're dealing with that, particularly where you have industries that work across several different countries. The more standardised we can make the approach, the better and easier that will be to work with industry and specific suppliers for products that work in the fishing industry as well. Has obviously been a focus of the project. So I think that awareness is increasing, and I think there's definitely an opportunity there within OSPAR to take forward some of the targeted measures that focus on products that we see in the marine environment. And I agree that EPS is not a bad substance. It's just we just need to cut out the leaks into the marine environment and make sure that it's part of that that it's recycled and remains in the circular economy.
Michail, we also saw when the SUP directive was launched, of course, the background for all the action being taken was that we were finding plastics in the ocean. Of course, that again is the way we're heading as in the UN process of negotiating for a plastic agreement, global plastic agreement. So, how much do you think that the marine litter is a key argument when we're reducing environmental problems linked to plastics these days?
I'm afraid it will remain an argument for years to come, because plastic will not disappear from the sea. And of course, as let's say the future treaty aims to do, it is necessary to address the upstream problems of design of plastic materials, design of plastic products, waste management on land, and so on. But we will never understand and we will never have effective measures unless we monitor litter on land, yes, of course, but in principle there should be no litter on land, and at sea, unless if we didn't have the monitoring data from the Marine Strategy Framework Directive and from the Regional Sea Conventions, we would never have the Single-Use Plastic Directive. If we don't have the data on the impact on the marine environment, I forgot, I omitted to mention this aspect, because you asked me earlier, what do you think is the major contribution of this project and so on? To demonstrate the mechanisms and the extent of impact of plastics in the marine environment. This is an area where we still need a lot of efforts and a lot of, let's say, research and a lot of projects, if I may put it that way. Because unless we have this kind of information, we will not be able to put the regulatory thresholds on various categories of litter that we were discussing. We have the legal, let's say, mechanisms, but in order to use them effectively, we need to have the information, because we cannot just invent figures. And we need the monitoring data at sea in order to understand how the measures that we take on land reduce the impacts in the sea. So the two must remain together. That's what I think.
Inês, did you, in your talks with the industry, did you feel that this message was passing through, or?
I feel it that in terms of traceability, what I feel is that again, the industry, at least the industry that I have came into contact with, are keen on understanding more about their value chain and to be equipped with that data. But again, they are not really fully aware of what are the demands that are coming up very soon. For example, the OceanWise project mentions very particularly the issue of traceability, plastic traceability, and how important mechanisms such as the digital product passport will be to really consolidate that information and to really bring that traceability into something real, into something that can be used by people, by buyers to agencies such as the Portuguese Environment Agency. Again, I ask, are industries aware enough that there are these important regulations coming up in 2023 that actually demand to collect information across the value chain on the type of materials, who are the producers, where does the material comes from, and to encode that into a digital product passport in order to then supply that information to the European Commission. I'm finding very few people are really aware of that. And that is an issue that very quickly needs to be embedded into the operations of the industry. My experience right now, my very short experience right now in Deloitte, already I can see that there are areas in which it's already offerings being developed in terms of digital product passport management, data management, which might be fundamental for business in the near future. But these will not be, worth nothing if a company is not fully aware of what are the demands that they are going to be in the near future. And particular for issues such as EPS, and all the materials, packaging materials that go into the fishing industry, for example, this needs to be addressed. And so either through clients in the end, even B2C or B2B, in the end, that are able to push for or to raise the awareness of their suppliers about these demands, because they are going to be pressed anyways to supply information on their value chain as well, the end clients. So I hope that in the near future, more and more industries will become more aware of the necessities and the areas in which they need to look, such as the issue with the eco-design regulation and DPP.
Anna, the companies that you're working with that reach you, are they ready for the new product, digital product passport? I know we talked about this during at OceanWise, but we also saw the passport as an opportunity, because of course if a product is more sustainable, the information will be there, and the discarded product, the waste can have more value if the right information is there, and it will help recyclers and everything. But how are the companies ready for this?
The Portuguese industry, in terms of the injection molding part, that it's the one that we work more, the Centimfe works more, they are not the OEM, so they are not the producer of the product when it reaches the market. So they are a supplier of the Mercedes, BMW, etc. So the main frame of our industry is that. And so they are more or less thinking that they are not the focus of the eco-design for sustainable products, but the BMW, Mercedes, etc. And so they are more or less waiting, the typical Portuguese posture in terms of EU regulation. They are waiting to see if that is going to be mandatory for them to have the digital passport or if they only have to provide information. But when we have to, Centimfe was one of the technical centers in Portugal that has to make or tried to make a recommendation when the regulation was in a process of public acceptance of recommendations, and Centimfe work on that with the industries. And basically what we thought that probably the industry need more time, because more of our companies, they are quite small. So they do not have to have an idea. The person that works on environmental is the one of the quality and the safety, right? It's the same person that do these three things on a company. So it's quite hard for them individually to look at a regulation so big as this, the eco-design for sustainable products, and try to figure it out what is going to be the consequence for them. So you do some kind of that work for them, but we do not understand completely which is their market, and so we don't understand alone which is going to be all the demands they're going to have, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that they need some help, but they will not going to have the time, because the time is already there. And so companies they really have to talk and to reach the entities that can help them to make that road more faster, because I think that they are always waiting for something else.
Well, I hope we've helped you with some good arguments.
I hope so.
But and finally, Elisa, you have a broader view than that of Portugal. I hope the Portuguese companies are not the only ones.
No, I think companies in general are struggling because and I think associations in general also are, both national associations and European associations are trying to, first of all, map all the activities that are there, because while you think that it's only going to be the packaging and packaging waste directive tomorrow, that's not the case. So both construction product regulation and the eco design revision were launched on the 30th of March. Tomorrow you're going to have the packaging and packaging waste. You're going to have one on green claims. You're going to have one on biodegradable and compostable plastics. So I think it's not each one of these legislations individually that the companies struggle coping with. I think what the industry in general is struggling is coping with all of them together, more or less at the same time. Not to mention other regulations that have been mentioned by Inês, like corporate social responsibility reporting and other corporate issues that have to be done, or maybe others that will come, like the revision of REACH and the CLP that's also emerging. I don't think it's one by one that is problematic. I think it's the fact that there are many. So most companies face what has been said before. It's just one person dealing with safety issues, quality issues, environmental issues, and trying to decide what comes better first and what comes later. And maybe in this context, marine litter is not the first thing on the table to deal with by companies. So I think the fact that OSPAR and OceanWise have focused on marine litter also helps us to look twice of what we are doing and what we could do better to ensure that there's less marine litter, plastic marine litter in general, and EPS marine litter in particular.
On that note, we really need to close this roundtable. I wanted to ask you. I wanted to thank also everyone that's been online. I hear that I haven't been following in detail, of course, but I hear every time we break that the discussion has been very intense and fruitful, and so thank you all also for everyone that was replying back and providing more feedback to who was participating. I really want to see what happened online during the day, and well, I want to thank you all for participating today. Over the next, well, very soon we will still be uploading the final products of the OceanWise project. Most of them are already online, but keep checking over the next month for the final projects, and come back to us. Of course, we're closing the project, but we are on top of this issue, and we're carrying on with our work and our representations at both at OSPAR and in the EU technical groups on marine litter and others. And well, of course, the OceanWise team has people working in the very diversified fields that we showed you today. So reach out to us for continuation of for helping you with taking forward these results. And on that note, I thank you all, and well, and the participants this afternoon, and presenters and the invited guests. Thank you. Special thanks to all of you. And for those of you here in Lisbon, stay for the party. And for those of you online, thank you again, and don't hesitate to come back to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.